A very good morning to all of you. On behalf of PFRDA, I extend a very warm welcome to all our distinguished guests on the first pension conclave organized by PFRDA on the theme of emerging pension landscape in India, the way forward. I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished panelist, Mr. William Joseph Price, Senior Financial Sector Specialist, the World Bank Group, Dr. Nachiket Moore, Board Chair, Care India, Mr. Alexander L. Glenn, Global Head, Global Financial Markets, International Finance Corporation, Mr. Otto Thoresen, Director General, Association of British Insurers, Dr. Ajay Shah, Professor, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and Mr. Mukesh Agrawal, President, CRISIL Research. May I now request our Chairman, Sri R.V. Verma, to welcome our distinguished speakers and panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, on my personal behalf and on behalf of the PFRDA and its entire staff, it's my privilege to welcome our very esteemed panelists here this morning. I extend a very warm welcome to all the delegates, very distinguished representatives from the banking industry, the financial institutions, international finance institutions, our partners in the implementation of the national pension system, and other distinguished guests, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. We are very privileged to have a very distinguished set of panelists amongst us this morning. This is the first pension conclave of the PFRDA. Before I request William Price for delivering the keynote theme address, I'd like to introduce the panelists. William Price, he's from the World Bank, and he's had a very distinguished career and very, very rich experience, and he comes with very rich perspectives on the financial market and the pension industry have developed across the world. I'm sure his presence here and his presentation and interaction with all of you will give us a very deep and good insight into the functioning of the pension industry in different parts of the country. We have a lot to learn from whatever has happened in other parts of the world, and we are at a very evolving stage, so we look forward to his presentation. It's my privilege to welcome Dr. Nachiket Moore, who is Chairman, Care India, and also Director on the board of the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank of the country. He is a distinguished, eminent expert in the field of the unorganized sector, informal market, and he brings with him a very rich experience and perspective on the various financial developments and the financial instruments as they operate, whether they relate to the pension, to financing products, the banking products, the development banking products, and investment banking products. He has a very deep insight into the whole range of the financial sector instruments, and we look forward to his presentation and his views at this inaugural session. I have the pleasure to welcome Mr. Otto Thoresen. He is General of the Association of British Insurers. He came just this morning and straight from the airport. Special thanks and a very warm welcome to you, Otto. We're delighted to have you here this morning, and I'm sure you'll make up on your sleep later. It'll be a pleasure to have you here indeed this morning. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Ajay Shah at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. He has been very closely associated with the developments in the pension industry and also in the developments across this regulatory regimes in the country. particularly in the financial sector. He's had a very and eminent career in the research world, and no wonder he's been with the NIP before he, he's had experience in various other institutions. And Dr. Shah, we very keenly look forward to your presentation. Very constructive critique also of the various regulatory developments in the country, and we have learned a great deal and imbibed a lot of learning and knowledge from his presentations across very obviously, and we have been very pleased and inspired us, particularly from the regulatory perspective. It's very, very open mind, very constructive thinking, and we at the PFR regulatory regime is still evolving. It's a very early stage to learn from him. Dr. Shah, extend a very warm. I welcome Mr. Agarwal. He is President CRISIL Research, and Mukesh has been associated with us for a long time. He has a very eminent career in the research space, and particularly we are delighted when he said that he would share his views and thoughts on the investment pattern of the pension funds, the impact on the infrastructure development or other asset creation through long-term savings, through long-term funds, and which is a very important piece in the entire architecture of the national pension system as we have conceived. My pleasure to welcome Mukesh here this morning. Mr. Alexander Ilchin, in fact, he is the global head of the insurance group IFC. We regret that he's not been able to make it here this morning. We'll certainly miss him. So with this, I would request William to deliver his keynote theme address. And we have the theme as, of course, the Indian market, the emerging pension landscape going forward, the way forward. And William would share with us a very rich experience and perspectives on the way the pension market has evolved across different parts of the world. William.
So, well, first of all, let me say many thanks for the very kind introduction and for the invitation to be here. It's truly a real honour for me, and such an interesting and exciting country and set of issues in terms of the pension space. And also to be able to have this discussion with such a distinguished panel, some of whom I know from sort of a previous life, and many others who hopefully will be continuing this conversation going forward. I should say for my colleague Alex, I know he's on his way and he was landing this morning, so hopefully he's kind of navigating and he'll be able to get to us at some point. In fact, which wasn't planned, but that was a very good time. I was just saying you're definitely going to make it, but it's nice stage direction. So, but what I wanted to cover in these opening remarks is to talk a little bit about the demographic challenges, but not too much because I think people understand them relatively well. To talk about the vision as we see it from our work across the world, and I'm sort of based globally, so we work across literally the world in many different countries, from, countries such as India or Turkey and Mexico down through to sub-Saharan Africa, and countries large and small. So what I'll be going through is perspectives from working there, as well as those range of countries, as well as the research and previous experience that I and colleagues have had. A major focus on pension outcomes as a way of trying to think through the complexity that often exists in pensions, and to try and understand where we are and where we may want to go in terms of looking for improved solutions. Looking at some of the issues and examples from other countries and also from India, and then some concluding remarks. So let's do a sort of brief introduction on the demographics. So in this slide, what we're showing is basically all the 6 global regions as we see it. And if you look from the left to the right, it's pretty clear what's happening. And this is showing the share of the population aged 65 over the total population. Now, it doesn't really matter which region you are over that period till 2050, and the UN do some nice projections to 2100. You know, everyone's aging, but clearly when you look sort of vertically, there are different starting points and there are different rates of aging. Now, 10% of the global population is already over 65. That's going to be 20% by 2050, 30%, a little under by 2100 on the median projections. And India, what we show here is South Asia, the South Asian region, but it's the same for India, is relatively young, but aging rapidly. But I think the key point I would also make is, you know, if you're a current 40-year-old in India, for you, it sort of doesn't really matter very much that in 50 years' time, there's going to be a lot more old people. You're part of a generation, 100% of which are hoping to have a decent retirement income. So, yes, the situation will get more difficult going forward. Yes, populations are aging. Yes, that means there's a very long-term imperative. But for me, when looking at countries, you're also trying to think that there's actually a very short-term imperative. How is this generation going to have a decent old age retirement? Now, what we'll go on to discuss is that there's a need for basically every kind of solution. It's public and private. It's not public or private. You need to be thinking of occupational pensions, a whole range of different ways. So contributory pensions are not the only part of the story, but here we look globally at the percentage of the workforce who are contributing in different countries. And if you see, the yellow is basically where it's under 30%. And India, if you look kind of in India, both in its region and compared to some other regions of the world, is in that space where there's actually, at the moment, very low levels of contribution. And then as you'd expect, as you go sort of through the more, as you go sort of up the income spectrum and you get through to the darker green, the rate of contributions is very much higher. Now, it's not the only part of the story, but clearly the number of people contributing is going to be a key issue, as well as the numbers of people who are receiving pensions, which will come from a combination of pensions to which you contribute, as well as transfers for the government for people who are too poor to make contributions. And one thing to touch on before I go more pension specific is that the labour market is fantastically important for pensions, both the impact of pensions on the labour market, but also the need for a good labour market where people have access to jobs, both formal and unorganised. And what we're showing in this, again, these same 6 regions of the world, is that the labour force participation rate, sometimes extremely high. If you look at the East Asian and Pacific on the left-hand side, the lowest around about 50% in the Middle East and North Africa, which is an incredible challenge when you're thinking about pension provision there. And this region in India, somewhere in the middle. So it's, some strengths, but clearly it's very difficult to have a long-term contributory pension system, a long-term tax base that will fund social pensions if you don't have a high proportion of people engaged in labour market activity. So that's so far to tell us that, there are some key challenges, but I guess you didn't come here to learn that because it's kind of well known. It's essentially to set up this next picture where, if you like, this is a simplified picture of the vision of how to solve these problems. So if we start at the bottom, the labour market, the capital market, leading through to the drivers of long-term growth. For any country, long-run development has a very strong reliance on long-run growth. And that's the kind of backdrop for the pension story. But they're also the capital market, the labour market, they're both